model of El Salvador is cracked on an MS-13. So what is it? Well, let's start by looking at what's now taking place in Argentina. France 24 says this: Argentina's most violent city, Rosario, best known as the hometown of soccer star Lionel Messi, has in recent months seen a drastic and some say suspicious fall in murders. And as the city, Argentina's third largest, has long had a murder rate standing at around 5 times the national average, with up to 260 killings per year. Now, they say everything seems to have changed since the end of 2023. What happened? Well, they say that President Javier Milei, the guy with the chainsaw saying he's going to cut away all the fat from the government, he took office and it said he vowed zero tolerance for crime. Now, note that at the same time, the province of Santa Fe, where Rosario is located, is a very violent town, right? It got a new governor. That's Maximiliano Pallaro. And that's in Pallaro. What did he do? Immediately, he imposed harsher conditions on prisoners, particularly gang bosses, because what happens, sometimes these gang bosses get arrested, they go to prison, and they just run the gangs out of prison. It says that he started publishing photos of jail raids and subdued the prisoners. His actions earned him around 30 death threats in his first month in office and prompted a backlash from gangs who killed 4 civilians in March. And it's at Javier Milei, the new president. He then sent federal police and troops to Rosario. And so they've been cracking down on crime and not tolerating this stuff. Now, given that situation, that makes sense in Argentina, right? Start going after the gangs, committing the crimes and committing the murders, and what happens? Well, if you try to start prosecuting, going after gangs and crime, you can expect murders and crime to start going down. That was the effect there, and it worked. But we're also seeing similar drops in other countries that, well, they haven't really changed in terms of government. Take Venezuela, for example. Bloomberg said this: December of 2023, Venezuela's rate of violent deaths dropped to its lowest level in more than 2 decades, following years of massive migration as both criminals and victims fled the nation's economic crisis. The Venezuelan Violence Observatory registered 26.8 violent deaths per 100,000 inhabitants this year, from a rate of 35.3 for every 100,000 in 2022. So almost cut in half in about the span of a year. And as one of these individuals, director of the observatory, said in a webcast on Thursday, and notes that that's its lowest level since 2001 and is 1/3 of what it was in 2016. And that's that young people who have traditionally been the main victims of violence have fled the country. And criminals and gangs have also immigrated due to the lack of opportunities to commit crime. They're seeking opportunity to commit crime in America, is what's happening. Now, of course, the leader of Venezuela, who is not recognized by the United States recognizes the opposition as the official winner of the elections there. Well, the individual now in charge there, he claims that the drop in crime is because of his grand leadership. But look, without a doubt, we've seen that the Venezuelan gangs have in fact been moving to the United States. And so this is the other side of it. Well, if your criminals leave and then go to another country, your crime spreading is going to go down. Representative Tony Gonzalez, he's a Republican from Texas. He actually noted this issue in a recent House Homeland Security Committee hearing, talking about the impact of illegal immigration on national security. Let me show you this. Watch.
I would argue that TDA makes MS-13 look like Boy Scouts. And the reason I say that is because each criminal organization that comes always tries to one-up the one before it. I think one of the ways we fix this is we come together, federal, state, and local law enforcement, all pull their resources and go after these people. Go after these Venezuelan gangs that are terrorizing us. They may not be on a terrorist watch list. They may not, they may not be on a counter that we have. When I spoke with the director of the ICE, he told me there are over 10,000 known criminal aliens loose in the United States right now. That's, in my eyes, where we need to start, and then we go from there.
That's important stuff. Let me show you a bit more on this issue. This is New York Post. They say a one-time Venezuelan prison gang has erupted into a multinational migrant crime syndicate that is ravaging the United States. And it's the subject of more than 100 police investigations across the nation. This group is Tren de Aragua, the new vicious South American gang that has snuck into the United States among the millions of migrants who have crossed the border, and note that it's peddling drugs, guns, and women across the 50 states. From urban centers like New York City to Chicago to Florida beaches and once tranquil Middle America. In Colorado, it says, the gang even got a green light to shoot at police, according to a federal memo. And so this Latin American gang, coming mainly from Venezuela, is now wreaking havoc across the United States. And it's other gangs also. It's actually not just them. MS-13, the Mexican Mafia, 18th Street, very violent gangs. Many of these have networks that go between the United States and their countries of origin throughout Latin America. Including murders is just suddenly going down all throughout that region. Some analysts are claiming this downward trend is because gangs and criminals are coming here, coming to the United States. And obviously, if while your violent criminals and your murderers leave a country, crime is going to go down there, and then they're going to bring that crime somewhere else. Now, like others say, that the drop in crime is because of new tough-on-crime policies that are now being adopted in some of these countries. Now, this drop is happening in Argentina. It's happening in Venezuela. We're also seeing it taking place in places like Brazil. This is from the website of the government of Brazil. They say this: Brazil has the lowest number of murders in 14 years. What's going on? Well, there were some indicators last year on why this was. AP said this, July 2023. Brazilian researchers say the number of violent deaths last year reached the lowest level in more than a decade, puzzling some experts because there's been an explosion of firearms circulation in the country in recent years. So how do you make sense of this, right? Suddenly, crime is the lowest level in 14 years, and this is despite the fact that people have more guns. More guns, less crime. Why is that? Well, the context of that explosion of firearms is important. What happened? Well, the former populist president, Jair Bolsonaro, made it so that regular citizens could own guns. And so the explosion of firearms is law-abiding citizens being able to have guns. So how is it that regular citizens owning guns and not just criminals is suddenly leading to a drop in crime? Well, sounds like a mystery to me, right? Some reports claim that a war between some of the major gangs that took place several years back is also a factor. That would not explain the change last year. The truce between some of the major violent gangs because they were having a gang war, that's several years back. And so how is it, again, that law-abiding citizens having guns caused a drop in crime? Well, maybe it's because regular citizens can suddenly defend themselves. And maybe criminals are becoming a little less willing to try their luck. Now, that being said, some other stuff is going on too. Now, again, in Latin America, it's all kind of mixed. It's not just one case all over the whole region. Different countries have different factors that are leading to this. It does seem, again, that there is some truth to the issue that Tren de Aragua is causing a lot of these problems. That's mostly the factor in Venezuela. Country by country is seeing different factors. This is also where the solution to crime comes into place. What do you do about it? Well, there's different ideas on this. El Salvador has kind of become the working model for a lot of Latin America. And especially, mostly, right, not just for every leader there, it's mostly resonating with the populist presidents, right, so-called, who are now getting elected. Individuals like Javier Milei, individuals like Bolsonaro, these people took a harsher stance on cracking down on organized crime. Now, Reuters said this about the El Salvador model. They said the number of homicides in El Salvador dropped nearly 70% during 2023. The Central American country's security authorities said this, again at the time, crediting a prolonged state of emergency declared by the government of President Nayib Bukele to fight crime gangs. And so rather than just let them do their thing, he is very strongly cracking down on them. And as a state of emergency declared in early of 2022 allows police, right, what does it do? It lets the police go and swiftly arrest and jail suspected gang members while suspending their right to a lawyer and court approval of preliminary detention. If they think someone's a gang member, they basically just go and grab them, throw them in prison, and so what's happened? Well, it's not clear whether all these people are actually guilty, which is actually why they're saying maybe it's a human rights issue. But they've also seen that crime is going down exponentially. Now, notice that since it went into effect, security forces have arrested nearly 75,000 suspected gang members and released 7,000, according to official data. So, of course, they're not just keeping them there forever. They're also seeing which ones are actually guilty, which ones aren't. Now, the issue is that a lot of American news outlets and news outlets in other parts of the world, well, they've been heavily criticizing El Salvador for going after the gangs, right? Again, although Latin America has the highest murder rates in the entire world, more than like worst parts of Africa, even though it's the worst in the world for this, they're saying that you can't treat the gangs badly, even though the gangs are going to make it some of these countries unlivable. For example, a lot of the mass migration coming to the U.S. from some countries like Guatemala and stuff, it's because of the gangs in a lot of cases. Now, just as an example, let me show you what BBC said last year. This is BBC, May of 2023. They say, El Salvador gangs, mass arrests bring calm, but at what price, right? Now, here's The Economist just a few months ago saying something similar. They say the world's most violent region needs a new approach to crime. Gangs are gaining ground in Latin America. Iron fist policies won't beat them back. Well, again, it goes country by country. We're seeing it's actually working in El Salvador. It's working in many of these countries, in fact. It's working in Argentina. It's not working in other countries. For example, Mexico. It's not working in Haiti. It's not working in countries that have tried to kind of become friends with the gangs or just let them do their thing. That's the difference. Now, it seems the issue is this. Those so-called iron-fisted policies, they seem to be the only method that is working. The only thing they've found so far that can actually work against powerful cartels, some extremely violent gangs. Because, for example, in Mexico, they have elections where you have politicians coming and saying, hey, I'm going to get tough on crime. What happens? They get executed. They get assassinated. They kill them. And so you can't even have politicians come in saying they're going to fix the problem because the gangs murder them. What do you do about this? Now, look, this is getting the attention of some of the leaders in these countries who want to put an end to the crime and the violence. Bloomberg Businessweek said this in February. They said in only 2 years, Nayib Bukele transformed El Salvador from one of the most dangerous countries in Latin America, meaning it's one of the most dangerous countries on the face of the planet, to among the safest. That sent his popularity soaring, even as he's come under criticism for an increasingly authoritarian bent, right? Because, again, he's going after the gangs. And it's that mayors in Peru successfully pressured President Dina Boluarte to emulate at least some of what they're calling the Bukele plan, again, modeled after Bukele in El Salvador. And thus they're doing this by suspending constitutional rights and allowing the military to take charge of work normally done by police. What is that work? That work is fighting against cartels and gangs. Because, again, a lot of these gangs are paramilitary. A lot of them basically have the arms and vehicles and equipment of a small military. And police can't really fight against them. Not to mention the fact that, again, because of corruption and because of assassinations, anybody who tries going after them tends to get killed. They're having the military take over this. Now, notice that in Ecuador, where the explosion of violence tied to murderous drug gangs has roiled what was once one of Latin America's most peaceful countries, President Daniel Noboa is boasting about plans to build prisons on ships and Bukele-style mass detention centers on land to accommodate all the people he's arresting. They're going after all these gangs, and there's a huge number of gang members. which means that they, again, have to arrest a lot of people. The problem, again, you're having with a lot of the media and criticisms of this is there are so many criminals, there are so many gang members that they do not fit in normal prisons. And so if you need to arrest murderers and rapists and drug traffickers, what do you do with them? Well, you got to put them in prison. And when you build new prison facilities, well, what does it look like? It looks like prisons built for a whole lot of people. They're getting criticized for cracking down on crime because there are so many people they have to go after. That's the problem these countries are having. But again, the model that's working and the model that's being adopted in many countries, again, Peru, Ecuador, others, is the Bukele model. But look, back to the other issue. The big question here is whether drops in crime are happening throughout Latin America because they're sending their criminals here to the United States. What's going on? Now, look, we're actually not seeing these drops in crime in every country in the region. Many have tried taking the approach, again, of Bukele in, again, El Salvador. And others have taken the other approach. A lot of other countries are pandering to the gangs. Mexico, for example. Or they're taking more light on crime approaches. Now, again, a lot of countries are still doing that. You look at some of them where drug trafficking is not really even a crime. You look at some of them where the government's trying to avoid maybe deaths of citizens by just letting the cartels and letting the gangs just do their own thing. Now, you'd think that that would maybe solve things from their perspective. Hey, you know what? The argument in Mexico is they say that their crime is being caused by America because Americans buy the drugs from the cartels. That's actually the narrative they have there. So what's happening? Well, they started basically letting the cartels do their own thing. The government says, okay, we'll step back. We're not going to risk the lives of our people to, again, fight these groups. What happened? Well, the drug cartels basically can do their own thing then. But what is happening then is the drug cartels are fighting each other. They're having turf wars. And this is causing a recent spike in violence across Mexico. Now, this also ties into the drug trade, but it also ties into battles to control the migrant border crossings because human trafficking is becoming a multi-billion-dollar business, and it's booming. Business of human trafficking is booming because of the mass migration. We see similar trends. Crime is growing in Cuba. Now, of course, part of that is due to the nature of its communist government, again, where the regime there has for several years been cracking down on dissent. Again, what do they define as crime there? Maybe believing in democracy, not supporting the supreme leader, that can get you arrested. Crime is also still very bad in Haiti, and that's despite the fact that around 4% of the country's entire population has left to migrate to the United States. Now, look, it does seem the difference in these countries on whether they're seeing drops in crime or surges in crime, because you're seeing both, actually. It's related to the approach they're taking to crime. And almost across the board, actually, the tough on crime policies, or at least the ones the citizens are, or at least when citizens can defend themselves, let's say, these are the things that are working. There's also the Venezuelan model, which is send your gang members to America. That's the other one. But look, back to the other issue, okay, right? This isn't a big issue we're having here. Is the drop in crime that's happening there, is it because they're sending their criminals here? Well, look, without a doubt, there is evidence that criminals from a lot of these countries are coming to the United States. You can't deny it, right? But we also see the problem the migrant gangs are already creating in the United States because of that. And there was also just recently some statistics on that we saw from ICE, Immigration Enforcement. This is Representative Tony Gonzalez, a Republican from Texas, posting some of the ICE statistics on X. Here's what he said, and this is true. He said, as of July 21st, 2024, there were 662,566 non-citizens with criminal histories on ICE's national docket. 13,099 criminals convicted murderers, right? These are 13,000 individuals in the United States who are not supposed to be here, convicted of murder. Now, it used to be the case because, again, ICE is Immigration Enforcement. If you are what they call a criminal alien, right? You're not supposed to be here and you're a criminal. They kick you out of the country. But because of the sanctuary city programs, ICE can no longer do that. The most they can do is monitor them. And imagine you bring in whatever number you want to believe, whether it's 7 million, whether it's 10 million, whether it's 30 million, 600, over 600,000 individuals who are criminal aliens, technically, being allowed to stay here. That's a big percentage of the number of people who came. And so again, for these countries, having 600,000 fewer criminals is a big deal. Now, look, without a doubt, a very large number of these convicted criminals have come to the United States with the waves of migrants and illegal immigrants. And the numbers from ICE, those are also just the ones we know about. Just because ICE doesn't have a document on them doesn't mean that maybe they're not criminals, because some are just not known, right? We don't really know the full number. So if you look at the full picture, the issue of crime throughout Latin America, whether crime is going down there as criminals come here, is that the issue? Or is it because of local changes in policies? Well, actually, I'd say it's a bit of both. It's actually not one or the other. I think it's accurate to say it seems there is some truth to all of it. It's likely a mix of these factors. You cannot doubt it, right? Without a doubt. Crime is coming here as criminals come here. We see this, for example, in the investigations being carried out across the United States into groups like Tren de Aragua. And in places where crime is dropping there, it's because some countries are actually starting to get tough on crime. This is also undeniable. And now you'd say that maybe in some of these countries like Ecuador, for example, is their crime dropping because of the tough on crime policies, and because they're cracking down on crime, are the gang members fleeing and coming here? Some of these governments actually are trying to take precautions to make sure that does not happen. For example, Ecuador has actually put in place border guards to try to make sure known criminals are not allowed to join the migrant caravans. Other countries allow it. Mexico, for example, they don't really go after them. And so it's actually different country by country. A lot of the ones that are getting tough on crime, though, they are, in many cases, trying to take precautions to make sure they're not sending criminals here. Others don't care at all. Venezuela, for example. And so it's a bit of a mix. You do see a bit of truth on both sides. It's not just one or the other. It's a mix. Well, everyone, that's all for tonight. Thank you for joining us. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free.